opportunity. So for today's video, we have online lesson about basic function and structure of the skin. I know some of us are using skincare to be even more beautiful and to achieve our desired glow up. But don't get stressed. Even if you are not that smooth and brighter skin, you are still pretty. Be your own version, okay? Moving on. I am here two beautiful ladies, Miss Geraldine and Miss Vian. That will be our big shock. Enjoy watching.
Good day, students! For today's lesson, we will talk about the skin. The skin is the outer covering of our body. It is the largest and the heaviest organ in our body. Did you know that our skin will measure for about 20 feet flat once it is laid? And it is the 16% of our body weight. Our skin consists of three basic layers: the epidermis, the dermis, and the hypodermis. And now, let us first start with the first layer. This is the epidermis. The epidermis' main function is to protect our body from the external environment. And the epidermis continually shed for every 4 weeks. Did you know that every dust in your house consists of dead skin cells?
These skin cells contains keratin that provides a waterproof shield to our skin that prevents microorganisms to enter inside the body. However, if a harmful microorganism make its way inside our skin, the Langerson cells would protect and sense the harmful microorganism. The epidermis also shows the skin color of a person with the help of melanin that provides the tone or color of the skin. More melanin produces darker skin color, and aside from that, it is also provides protection from the harmful sun rays.
And now the second layer of our skin, the dermis. The dermis help the regulation of our body temperature. The skin is also a sensory organ, so that the dermis holds the connective tissues, sweat glands, and the nerve endings.
These nerve endings send signals to the brain, and the brain sends the reaction to a certain object that we touch, either it is hot or cold. It also serves as the regulator of our body temperature. The blood vessel that is within our dermis may contract or expand depending on the temperature in the external environment. Sweat glands are also located in the dermis that produces sweat once the temperature inside the body is too hot.
And lastly, the hypodermis. The hypodermis is a subcutaneous tissue that holds the fats and the tissues in our body. 50% of our fats are found in the subcutaneous tissue, which is the hypodermis.
The main function of this layer is to cushion our muscle and bones from a sudden force from the external environment. This also gives us a warmer temperature inside our body.
Hello! In this video, we're gonna talk and focus on the basic structure of the skin. The skin is made up of two main layers, the epidermis on the top and the dermis below it. Below the dermis, you have subcutaneous tissue. This layer is called the hypodermis.
Below the superficial fascia, you have the deep fascia, which is like connective tissue that surrounds organs such as muscle, shown here. So you have two skin layers, the epidermis and the dermis. The skin itself contains many accessory things, skin appendages such as the hair follicle, sebaceous gland, sweat glands here, as well as erector pili muscle. The hair follicle and the surrounding stuff make up an important part called the pilosebaceous unit, which we will talk about later. You have sensory nerve fibers that come up and go all the way up to the base of the epidermis, and you have different types of sensory nerve fibers. Then you have the artery and the vein of the skin, which actually originates in the dermis and the subcutaneous tissue area, and they will project capillaries that will go all the way up to the base of the epidermis. Speaking of the epidermis can then also be further divided into other layers. So free to zoom into the epidermis. The basement membrane here separates the epidermis to the dermis down below. On top of the basement membrane, you have cuboidal epithelial cells, which make up the layer called the stratum basale. These cells essentially will divide. and as they divide, they will migrate up, but as they migrate up, they will lose their blood supply and flatten. You also find other cells in this layer, such as Merkel cells, which play an important role in sensation. As stratum basale divides, it will form a new layer on top. This new layer is called stratum spinosum. Within the stratum spinosum, you also find other types of cells such as melanocytes. Now, melanocytes are the cells which produce melanin, and melanin is essentially the pigmentation we have. You also find other cells such as Langerhans cells, which are a type of dendritic cell. These are antigen-presenting cells and play an important role in the immune system. As a stratum spinosum moves off, it forms another layer called a stratum granulosum. In this layer, they essentially die off even further and they form granules within the cells. Above the stratum granulosum is a layer called the stratum lucidum, which is only found on the thick parts of your skin such as the palm and the soles of your foot. The very top layer of the epidermis is called the stratum corneum, and this is also possibly the thickest layer of the epidermis. Above the stratum corneum and on top of the epidermis, you find bacteria that live normally on top. These are your commensal bacteria. Because we talk about the epidermis, it's good to also talk about the dermis. Now the dermis is essentially connective tissue, and so if we look at it, it's made up of many cells called fibroblasts, which produce and secrete extracellular matrix. An example is collagen. Muscles are also found here, and muscles play an important role in allergy, hypersensitivity, and inflammation. We also find sensory nerve fibers around this area as we talk about, and we have many different types. Remember, the skin artery and vein basically originates in the dermis as well as a hypodermis and will project capillaries all the way off to the base of the epidermis, and thus the stratum basale will be able to receive blood supply and will divide, but as the cells divide and move off, it will lose this blood supply and so will die off. Let's go back to the pilosebaceous unit, which is essentially a hair follicle and the other accessory appendages around it. So let's zoom into this area. The pilosebaceous unit is made up of several things. The first and most important one would be the hair follicle. And then you have a muscle. Since you're connecting at its base, this is the erector pili muscle. And this, when it contracts, it will shoot the hair up, and this is what you get when you get goosebumps, or when you're in a cold weather, for example. You have a gland called the sebaceous gland, which produces sebum, and this connects the hair follicle. The sebaceous gland produces sebum, which essentially lubricates the hair. You will also have the hair root here, which has a blood supply. Interestingly, there's actually a sweat gland which connects the hair follicle, and this is your apocrine sweat gland. Your apocrine sweat gland are found only in areas really where there is a lot of hair, such as axilla under your armpits as well as your genitalia. And these apocrine sweat glands are hormone driven. The sweat glands, the sebaceous glands, are essentially skin appendages, and you have other skin appendages. We talk about the apocrine sweat glands, where you also have another sweat gland called eccrine sweat gland, and these are the sweat glands that are found on your forearms and your legs just normally.
Now that we have discussed the basic function and structure of the skin, I hope we have learned a lot. So, let us now try to answer the following question in this link. Thank you for listening. Keep safe, everyone!